Hey everybody, give me just one quick second and I'll be live. Just want to make sure everything is fully operational. Has it started yet? There we go. So I just got to pull up the chat and we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Stephanie Bri Show. This is my plus or minus 2-hour news talk show where I go through recent, entertainment and pop culture, nerdy headlines and stuff, video game news and things of that sort. And we got a bunch of topics and some updates. So update number 1 is in the description. I think I mentioned this last week, but my new book is out. You should definitely go check that out. It is on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle Unlimited, or a physical copy if you want a paperback. Priced fairly competitively. $5 for a physical copy, $3 for the digital. Or if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can just read it. Anything helps. It's just a collection of short stories and poems. So that's the newest thing that I've got going on. I still got this thing I'm working on for the retro game channel, but I haven't got it like fully. I haven't got the kinks worked out yet, ironed out, as they say. So I'm still working on that, but it's coming soon. So I should have something to announce probably within the next week or two. Maybe next week, hopefully. We'll see. It just depends. I got so much shit going on right now. I've got some behind-the-scenes stuff going on I can't talk about. But if everything goes well, I'm going to be super busy the rest of the summer. But we'll see how things play out. So for now, let's jump into the headlines. We got some good ones. And if you're not familiar, I've already talked about the Kendrick Lamar versus who gives a shit Drake, whatever, beef. I think last night was Drake pretty much needs to go into retirement for a good, or hiding for a while, because Kendrick decisively took a victory lap that pretty much ended Drake's career, I would say. This one is coming from CNN.com Entertainment. Kendrick Lamar, Juneteenth, Not Like Us concert. So I'm just going to give you the bullet points. It's all the buzz on Twitter, so you probably already know what's going on. Yesterday was Juneteenth, which is a holiday that celebrates the freeing officially of the former slaves in the United States following the Civil War. It took a little while for the message to travel back in the day, and Juneteenth was the day it got to Texas, which was the last state to get the news, which is why that holiday was picked. But at his Juneteenth concert, in response to Drake accusing Kendrick Lamar of not being, quote, loved by the West Coast in Los Angeles, he had a whole bunch of fucking people come out for his concert to rap along with him, including not only LeBron James and other NBA stars, but one of them was actually an NBA Raptor. So, and that's significant because the Toronto Raptors is Drake's hometown basketball team. So Drake's popularity is hinged upon him being, quote, friends with celebrities, mostly basketball players, and all the basketball players he's allegedly friends with showed up to Kendrick's concert last night to diss the fuck out of him. So I think this ongoing beef has pretty much been settled. We have a clear fucking winner. It's Kendrick. It was always Kendrick. I mean, the West Coast is the best. We all know this. I talk about how much I love fucking West Coast G-Funk music all the fucking time. And the best part was not only all the celebrities coming out to diss Drake, that was pretty dope. All the gang members from the Crips and the Bloods coming together to make peace for a day. Kendrick talking about, the unity and everything else. But there was also, he played the song Not Like Us 5 times, and the entire crowd rapped along with him. And the best part was Dr. Dre came out and said the intro to the track as sort of a fuck you, Drake, we're done with you. You don't get any bigger than Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre on the West Coast hip hop scene, and Snoop and Warren G are already touring Canada right now with the West Coast is better than Canada tour, which is their, fuck you, Drake. I mean, it's just like, Drake fucked up, and now he's going to find out. Just kind of very similar to how Christopher Wallace found out the hard way what happens when you piss off the West Coast. You don't fucking do it. Christopher Wallace is sitting in a casket right now because of him popping off at the mouth. All right, here we go. NBCnews.com. Elon Musk, quote, tempers comments about advertisers as he looks to woo them back. So dipshit is dipshitting again. Musk said on Wednesday he tried to walk back remarks lashing out at advertisers fleeing his Twitter social media platform. We don't call it X. Musk said it was meant as a general point on free speech rather than a comment to the wider advertising industry. It wasn't to advertisers as a whole, dipshit said. It was with respect to freedom of speech. I think it's important to have a global free speech, blah, 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 blah. Freedom of speech doesn't apply to corporations, dipshit, so fuck off. I don't care what dipshit has to say. I just thought it's, whatever. Anytime we can shit on Musk and we can do it off his platform where he can't have a hissy fit, we'll do it. Now, this one is also coming from NBC News, but it was on every major website. I pull up the websites in order, and this was the site that brought it up. Baseball legend Willie Mays passed away at the age of 93. There's a whole bunch of articles on him if you don't know who he is. I heard his name before. I knew he was a famous ball player, but I didn't know who he played for or anything else. So there's a whole there's a whole bunch of articles online if you want to read about him. But if you're interested, he's one of the pioneers of bringing black people into baseball back at a time when it was a white man's sport. A lot more diverse today, I would argue. Anyways, this one is coming from CNN.com. It says McDonald's releases a new $5 value menu to combat inflation, which is kind of bullshit because back when they had the dollar menu, $5 was what it cost to get a cheeseburger, a meal, a whole Big Mac meal. So, whatever. It says beginning June 25th, McDonald's U.S. locations are selling a, quote, $5 meal deal for a limited time. Of course it's for a limited time, Jesus Christ. Corporate pandering and bullshit, patting themselves on the back, whatever. McDonald's is just like, well, people can't afford to eat our shit no more, so we better lower the price, I guess. Whatever. This one is coming from ABC News. This one is veteran actor Donald Sutherland, Kiefer Sutherland's dad, dead at 88. Donald Sutherland had a very prolific career. I'm not even going to mention everything he was in. If you watch this show, you probably know him from the Hunger Games. But that's not all he's known for. Kiefer Sutherland, we know from the Lost Boys, but he's done other stuff too. I'm not sure. I think it was Donald that was in the 1978 Invasion of the Body Snatchers because I don't think Kiefer would have been old enough. So yeah, old timer passes away, and this guy's done a lot of stuff. Even if you didn't remember his name, you'll know his face when you see him. And when you look up his filmography, you'll be like, wow, I know this dude. You know who Donald Sutherland is. So this one's kind of a tragedy in Hollywood. Dead at 88, so not terribly young, but not super old either. So that's a bit unfortunate. This one is coming from in ABC News. This one's pretty neat. It says, new horned dinosaur species discovered. It is, quote, largest and most ornate of its kind ever found, according to the article. Lokiceratops reniformis lived about 78 million years ago, researchers have said. A new giant horned species of dinosaur was discovered that researchers said is the largest and most ornate of its kind ever found, according to a study published Thursday, blah, blah, blah. Fossils of the dinosaur, which has been nicknamed Lokiceratops reniformis, including a skull and a partial skeleton, were unearthed on private land in Kennedy Coulee in the Badlands of northern Montana near the U.S.-Canada border. The dinosaur belongs to a group of horned dinosaurs known as ceratopsids, which evolved during the late Cretaceous period about 92 million years ago and survived until the end of the dinosaurs. Researchers said the dinosaur was a plant-eating dinosaur that lived in the swamps and floodplains of present-day Montana about 78 million years ago and is a cousin of the infamous Triceratops. There's a whole article here on it if you want to go read more. There's some, artist renderings. I don't know if there's AI or not, but artist renditions of what it may have looked like according to the article. So that's pretty neat. They're still discovering new dinosaurs all the time. I found this one on Bloomberg, which is a pretty fun sciencey sci-fi type article. Astronomers witness, quote, sudden awakening of massive black hole in faraway galaxy. This is on Bloomberg.com. I can't read the article because apparently they want money. I'm not giving them money. But if you have a subscription to Bloomberg, or if you're tech savvy and want to read the article yourself, go find it. This one is coming from Game Informer. These articles were pretty much all across the board. These are coming from the Nintendo Direct, obviously. But this is the Game Informer article because I pulled them up first. Zelda is finally the protagonist in The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, out September. It's really obnoxious that they're saying finally because she was the protagonist in two mid-90s CDI video games. I don't know if they're even going to mention that. And it says, for years, fans of the Zelda have clamored for the titular princess to star in her own game, but even as she's becoming a more prominent character in recent entries, the Zelda-led Zelda game has yet to appear on store shelves. That's a lie. It actually has. It was on the CDI. I mean, it's not a great game, but it still exists. So let's stop at the hyperbole. This isn't the first time you could play a Zelda in a Zelda game. Anyways, there's all kinds of coverage and trailers and shit about the game. It's exciting, and I think Switch fans are going to love it. If I still had a Switch, I'd probably buy this game. But for now, pretty neat. But come on, people. Do better reporting than that. Fucking Game Informer. They don't know what happened 6 months ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. Also from Game Informer, Metroid Prime 4 reemerges with new gameplay trailer and beyond subtitle. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It says it's coming out next year, but, it was revealed 7 years ago, so I'm skeptical. I don't trust Nintendo at this point. All right, Game Informer also has Mario and Luigi Brothership is a new RPG releasing later this year. This is the first new entry in 9 years, according to this. The game is subtitled Brothership and is apparently a seafaring adventure that will include new evolved, quote, Bros Moves, or Brothers Moves, I guess. The game is coming out November 7th. No word on who is the developer yet. Okay, well, there you go. This one is coming from Eurogamer, and it says Final Fantasy XIV's server capacity increased by, quote, roughly 50% compared to launch of Endwalker. How congestion will be eased for Dawn Trail. Square Enix has shared its plans to ease congestion in Final Fantasy XIV ahead of the launch of its new expansion, Dawn Trail, by expanding servers, basically. Yeah, I just read the headline. That's the whole story. That's literally the whole article. They added more servers. That's good news for people who play Final Fantasy XIV who don't want to be waiting in the queue for 3.5 hours to play the new DLC. There you go. This one is coming from Engadget. Embracer Group plans to use AI in game development after the company laid off 1,500 employees over the past year. Embracer Group is making the move to using AI in game development following the mass layoff and game cancellations a few months ago. The parent company of THQ Nordic, Gearbox Entertainment, and Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, detailed it, blah, 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 that it is adopting an AI policy to its game production model despite the controversy around the use of AI in the games industry. It said that not using AI will lead to the company lagging behind other major game developers and publishers like EA, Sony, Square, blah, blah, blah. AI has the capability to massively enhance game development by increasing blah, 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 bullshit, said in the report. By leveraging AI, we can create more bullshit. All right. It noted that AI may produce unethical, biased, discriminatory, or completely wrong results if it has not been properly trained, instructed, or used for purposes it was not designed. Yeah, no shit. So these guys laid off 1,500 developers and are replacing them with chatbots. And they argue that the chatbots are going to make them more competitive. This is bullshit. I don't know what games Embracer Group has in the pipeline, but this is the one time I'm going to call for a mass boycott of every product that they develop using AI. But it's not going to fucking matter. AI's here. There's nothing we can do about it. But this is bullshit. This is a very scummy thing for them to do. I hope they go out of business within the next 6 months. This one comes from mynintendonews.com. It says Bubsy in the Perfect Collection coming to Nintendo Switch. Limited run games, blah, blah, blah. Atari and Limited Run Games have announced Bubsy in the Perfect Collection. The collection of Bubsy games will be coming to Nintendo Switch, Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation 5, according to Atari. The collection will also have, quote, artifacts and interviews. You can see the announcement tweet below, blah, blah, blah. Which games will it be? It doesn't say. So, I don't know. I sure wish they would have announced which games are going to be in the collection, but it is what it is. Still, Bubsy had a couple of okay games back in the day, I would argue. This one is also from mynintendonews.com. It says, Beyond Good and Evil 20th Anniversary Edition launches next week on Switch. Ubisoft has confirmed in a now-deleted tweet that Beyond Good and Evil 20th Anniversary Edition will launch on multiple platforms, including the Switch, on Tuesday, June 25th. Features improved visuals, controls, and audio, along with brand new autosave and cross-save features. It was meant to be announced at the Limited Run Game Show this evening when this article was announced, which was June 20th. That's today. Pricing has yet to be announced by Ubisoft. Okay, well, there is a trailer if you want to watch it. I'm sure you can find it. It's on My Nintendo News, but everybody else probably had it. And Nintendo up to their shenanigans once again. Nintendo now going after sheet music with more DMCAs. According to two separate community posts on YouTube, it seems like Nintendo is looking to take down fan-arranged sheet music based on its franchises. The first is via the popular channel Sheet Music Boss, which states, quote, in a classic Nintendo move, they DMCA'd all of our correctly licensed sheet music before expressing frustration toward the situation. We're working on it, but it's super frustrating, and especially given that so many Nintendo pieces aren't available anywhere as sheets. Sorry to everyone affected. Please know it's totally out of our control. The second is from Purple Shala, a pianist who has amassed a following of nearly 30,000. In a similar post, she confirms that her sheet music hosted via Music Notes has been taken down by Nintendo, including arrangements for Fire Emblem and Xenoblade Chronicles. Okay, it says Nintendo has been pretty vigilant when it comes to targeting channels hosting official soundtracks without the necessary licenses to do so, but venturing into sheet music seems to be a new thing for the company. It admittedly makes us feel a little uneasy. This is the editorial of the article. But then we're not experts on the matter. Blah, blah, blah. It says we've reached out to Music Notes for comment, but it seems like individuals who wish to upload their own Nintendo arrangement on the site may want to think twice before doing so. So Nintendo going after sheet music. Jesus Christ. What are you going to do with sheet music? Literally, fucking fuck off, Nintendo. Every time they do something, this is the kind of thing they do. They do a shitty thing like this the same day they release a Nintendo Direct, because they want you to focus on, look at all the shiny new things that are coming out to play with, instead of how shitty we're being towards people. Fucking Nintendo. Oh, goodness. All right, this is also from Nintendo Life, our last article, and I wanted to read this because I have been having issues with this Tricky Trials update. It says, Microsoft's Tricky Trials update is now live. Here are the full patch notes. I hope they mention the bugs, because I'm having a lot of fucking bugs. Okay, new features. Added a new underground structure called the Trial Chambers. Added 2 new mobs, Breeze and Bogged. Added a new weapon, the Mace. Added 3 new enhancements exclusive to the Mace. Density, Breach, Windburst. Added the following blocks. Crafter, Trial Spawner, Ominous Trial Spawner, Vault, Ominous... Okay, bullshit. There's way too much to read. Oh my goodness gracious. Lots of stuff going in here. Big ol' update, but I don't know. I think there's some bugs with this update, because I've been trying to play the game this past couple of weeks since the update came out, or I guess this past week since the update came out, and I've been running into some tremendously game-breaking bugs where my crafting tables randomly stop working. Another one is wood gets locked in my inventory, where I can't craft it, move it in my inventory, move it to my hotbar. Hello. It's very frustrating, and it only started after this new update. So hopefully other people, if they're having the same problem, will report the bug and Microsoft will fix it. Very doubtful. They're not super hip on fixing bugs, because it's sort of a known thing in the Minecraft community that Microsoft considers bugs, air quotes, as features. You know, because Minecraft users exploit bugs and turn them into features. So I don't know how you can turn a disabled crafting table that breaks the game into a feature, but we'll see. Whatever. Oh, goodness gracious. That's everything I have right now for news and rumors. So let's go ahead and jump into the topics. First topic, movie discussion. Whatever happened to Redbox? Does anybody remember Redbox? You know, that vending machine that basically put Blockbuster Video out of business alongside all of their bad corporate decisions. You know, the big one was not buying Netflix when they had the opportunity to get it for pennies. Yeah, hindsight is 2020, so we can't really blame them for that. But no, what happened to Redbox? I say this because, like, 3-4 years ago, during the height of the pandemic, when everybody was stuck at home, we were renting Redbox. Me and my sister and her family, we were renting Redbox movies every day, like 3 or 4 movies a week, just constantly renting movies. I have been driving around the city I live in of about 50,000 people, so not an insignificant population. Plenty of retailers, department stores, general stores, grocery stores, dollar stores, et cetera, et cetera. And I haven't seen a Redbox since I've been back, and I've been back for a year this week. I haven't seen a single Redbox. Like 3-4 years ago, they were every dollar store, every gas station, every grocery store, even Walmart's had Redbox in their lobbies, and now they're gone. So I don't know if this is something worth looking into. I'm just going to do a quick Google search real quick just to see if Redbox did go away. So let's see if I can get to the bottom of this. Is Redbox still around? Okay, well, according to Google Gemini, as of August 2023, they're still in business, but that's almost a year ago. So that's not exactly, current. August, that was August 23 was almost a year ago. Let's click on their website. Nope, they don't have a website. The website's gone. Oh, no, wait, there it is. No, that's Wikipedia. Where's Redbox? There it is. What's new? Okay, well, their website still works. I'm gonna do a location search. It looks like we have, let me click on this. According to Google, we have 3 Redboxes in Twin Falls. I need to see, where is this? Walgreens? Oh, no wonder. I don't shop at Walgreens. Walgreens. Okay, so it looks like our Redboxes are only at Walgreens. Is that it? Does Redbox only? Yep, all three of our locations are Walgreens. Okay, so I guess maybe Dollar General doesn't, and Walmart don't carry Redbox anymore. I wonder if that's the case. I'm gonna search that real quick. Does Walmart have Redbox? Nope. According to Google, Walmart has removed all of their kiosks at all of their stores. So yeah, that's a blow to Redbox, I would say. Redbox, excuse me. Never used Redbox. I don't know. I only rented them during the pandemic. Before that, I had no reason to. So it appears as though it appears as though Redbox is still technically in business, but they're shrinking, or they're having trouble finding retailers willing to host their kiosks. So RIP Redbox, I guess. Whatever. I didn't know how much traction I was going to get out of that topic. I just wanted to look into it. I should have done some research before I started. I do apologize for that. I got a comic book topic. This one might give me a little more meat and potatoes. The comic book topic is, were the 90s comic book movies actually any good? I don't just mean like individually, like one or two. I mean as a whole. Because everybody thinks the comic book superhero craze started with the Avengers, Iron Man, and the launch of the MCU. But we were regularly getting comic book and superhero movies throughout the entire decade of the 90s. And I would argue it started in 1989 with Tim Burton's Batman. That's when it became a regular occurrence, because from 1989 until today, there has not been a year, not 1 year gone by, we haven't had at least one or two superhero or comic book themed movies in theaters. Not one year has gone by since 1989. Prior to that, it was a little iffy. You had the 4 Superman movies. You had Conan the Barbarian, which is actually based on a novel series, but he did have a comic book. You could argue, if you wanted to, Masters of the Universe, because it's based on a toy property, but the toys came packaged with a comic book. But you see what I'm saying? It's a little fuzzy. You had the 4 Supermans, you had Supergirl, you had Swamp Thing, and not much else. There were like a handful, maybe 10 total comic book movies released in the entire decade of the 80s. And that's if you count the low budget direct to VHS Captain America and Punisher movies. If you don't count those, then there weren't that many. If you're only talking theatrically released, wide release movies with a big budget, no, there were 2 in the 80s that would qualify. And the second one was Batman, 1989, which was the tail end of the decade. But that's not what we're talking about. The question is, were they any good? So I'm going to run through. I'm not going to Wikipedia. I'm not going to IMDb. I'm just going to go off the top of my head what I remember. We had, starting in, I'm not going to get the release dates, but starting in 1991 or 92, no, 1990, we have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action movie, which is absolutely a comic book property. And that is 100% a quality film. And faithful to the source material. Very faithful to the source material, with minor concessions to the cartoon audience that expanded the brand. Minor concessions. Overall, it was still very much the comic book brought to life. There were 2 more Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle live action movies in the 90s. The immediate sequel, Secret of the Ooze, not as good as the first one, but not as bad as some people want to make you think. And then there was the rubbish third entry that we don't talk about. Might as well have been a direct-to-VHS sequel, considering nobody went to the theater to see Turtles in Time. Myself included. Even though I was a big fan of TMNT at the time and had seen the first 2 movies in the theater. Had no interest in Turtles in Time. It just looked dumb. Just from the commercials, it looked dumb. The suits were cheaper. We didn't have any live-action, theatrically released Superman films in the 90s. We had a small-budget television series on network TV that got popular in syndication on TNT later in the decade. But that's not what we're talking about. You got Blade, which is a quality movie, but that came out all the way in 1998, which is the ass end of the decade. Way at the end. You don't get X-Men until 2000, which launches, the beginnings of what would become eventually the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They had their ups and downs throughout the first, decade of the 2000s, with their Spider-Mans and, Ghost Rider and everything else. But then what else was there in the 90s? There was The Mask, which is a quality film, but not at all faithful to the comic book. Not even a little bit. In name only. It's The Mask in name only. Then you had Judge Dredd, which is an entertaining film, but let's be real. It's pretty crappy by today's standards. And it wasn't even great by 1990 standards. It was a total bomb. And nobody really, I shouldn't say nobody, but it's not generally well regarded among comic book superhero fans. And then we had Spawn, which I would argue is one of the worst films ever made to be based on a comic book or superhero property. What else was there? Then there were the 3 subsequent Batman films. Batman Returns, which is mediocre but remembered fondly for some reason. Batman Forever, which is actually one of the better films in the franchise, in my opinion, but not remembered fondly for some reason. And then the obnoxious but hilarious Batman and Robin. Hilarious because it's a cheesy-ass B-movie, not because it's an intentional comedy. That's pretty much it for big names. You know, you had like The Phantom. That movie was a bomb. Nobody remembers it. And I'm not even 100% if that's a comic book property or not. Superhero movies that weren't based on comic books. We had Dick Tracy, which was a god-awful film. We had The Shadow, which is a mediocre film at best. Entertaining, sure, but mediocre at best. We had, what else? We had, is that it? I think that's it for like, you know, like theatrically released stuff. I mean, I guess you could count The Rocketeer as a superhero flick, but that's not based on a comic book. That's an original, I think, Disney thing. And that movie was a hot stinking mess. I saw that in theaters. And when I say saw that in theaters, I mean I went to the theater and ate popcorn while it played on the screen. I've already talked about at length how the summer blockbuster nearly died in the 90s. People forget this. There were a handful of what we call today summer blockbusters. But most of your big budget, your big draws, your big movies that everybody went to see wouldn't be what we classify as blockbusters today. They were things like Titanic and, you know, comedies. Comedies were real big in the 90s for some reason. Action, like straight up action movies. Like, you know, buddy cop movies and things like that. But like your big sci-fi summer blockbusters, they were like hit or miss in the 90s. If you count Twister, that's 1. ID4, that's 90, 95, 96. And then you got, you know, 98, 7 on. Yeah, you got some good summer blockbusters. But the first half of the decade, dry. You got Jurassic Park in 93, which I think counts, and Terminator in 91, Terminator 2. But those weren't even the biggest movies of those years. So I don't know, but that's I've already talked about that. We're talking about comic book movies. So far, I would say out of the what did I say, about 15 or so movies that were count as comic book movies from the 90s, I would say 3 of them were legit good. Ninja Turtles, Blade, and The Mask. Ninja Turtles 2 was pretty good, but it was a letdown compared to the first one. And I guess Batman Forever was pretty good, but it was kind of cheesy too, I guess, now that I admit it. But were there others? There weren't any that I can think of that made a splash. I mean, Demolition Man was a big movie, but that's not really superhero or comic book. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about the animated films? Well, that's a whole separate topic. Yeah, there were some good animated TV shows back in the 90s. Obviously, X-Men, Batman animated series, Spider-Man, so on and so forth. TV was a good, TV is where we got our comic book media back in the 90s, besides comic books themselves or video games like Maximum Carnage was a good one on the Sega Genesis, and I guess there was a Super Nintendo port, but it was a Sega Genesis game, let's be real. What else? I mean, yeah, the small screen, because we got Smallville, but that came either at the end of the decade or into the 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. But we did have Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. We did have a Flash TV series for a brief moment in time. And I think there was a Swamp Thing TV series, but I don't remember if that was the 80s or 90s. Or if that was just a made-for-TV movie. In the 90s, when Jurassic Park was relevant, well, it's relevant today, but I mean, when it was new, when it was the current hip new thing, there weren't really a lot of straight copycats in that, you know, giant dinosaur movies. But there were some big reptile movies in the 90s, Anaconda, Lake Placid, I guess. I don't know if the Tremors would count, but those were creature features. But Tremors came out in 1990, which is 3 years before Jurassic Park. So maybe Jurassic Park ripped off Tremors. Wouldn't that be a bitch? But no, if you look at the big blockbusters of the 90s, the big moneymakers, Titanic is the biggest, obviously. That's not a blockbuster. Forrest Gump was tremendously, massively successful. That's not really a blockbuster. That's just a comedy. You know what I mean? But superhero movies, they really weren't. They were there. They were the beginning. You know, they were, you know, Hollywood was just trying to figure out. They were just trying to figure out how to do superhero movies. You know, because the 90s was that awkward period where CGI still looked like something you would find in a Commodore 64 tech demo. And it didn't quite look believable yet. We were still in the uncanny valley where it was like, no, we weren't even uncanny valley yet. We were still in that period where it just looked like ass. We didn't get to uncanny valley until like the Star Wars prequels, where it was like good enough to trick our brains into thinking we're seeing something on screen that's not pixels, but also bad enough that it's like our brains were like, I don't know what to make of this. Lois and Clark did last a while, yes. Actually, I think it was like 7 whole seasons. What helped Lois and Clark was the fact that in the 90s, DC did their Death and Return of Superman big event, which was immediately followed by the wedding of Clark Kent and Lois Lane in the comics, which was replicated in the TV series to coincide with it happening in the comics. And that boosted that series ratings quite a bit. People seem to forget this, but that during the 90s, Superman was unstoppable. His comic books were the #1 selling comic book in the world. And he had like 12 different, he was a regular character in like 12 different monthly, bi-monthly, and weekly books. I mean, Superman was everywhere in the 90s. Yeah, the X-Men, everybody always remembers the X-Men were everywhere. They were too. But as much as the X-Men were everywhere, Superman was even more everywhere in the 90s. Not so much in video games. X-Men just lends itself better to a video game, I think, than Superman does. It's kind of hard to make a Superman video game because how can you be a superhero that has unlimited powers in a video game? It's like, what are you going to do? Fly cats out of trees and help old ladies across the street for 3 hours? It's not much you can do with Superman. Justice League, yeah, it's a little bit more involved. But I just think X-Men lends itself better to a video game format than Superman does. Superman's a fantastic comic book, don't get me wrong. I love reading Superman comics, especially Action Comics. And Superboy is pretty good. There's some good Superman stuff in the comic books. But, all right, let's get back to movies for a second. So let's just break down the big ones, the good ones. Ninja Turtles. Like I said, Ninja Turtles, 1990, the start of the 90s, coming off the heels of Batman, 1989, Tim Burton. Yeah, I would argue, and I think most people would, TMNT was a legit good movie and legit, truly faithful to the comic books with some minor concessions to the cartoon. You know, like them eating pizza, saying cowabunga, and the multicolored bandanas. But the rest of the movie was straight up out of the comic book. Nothing to do with the cartoon. The Mask. Great movie. Legit good, solid movie. Not at all faithful to the comics. Not at all. The Mask comic books were a mature rated, not comics code approved adult comic book that was similar to A Nightmare on Elm Street. The Mask murdered people brutally in the comics. It was a bloody comic. I don't think so. I think that was a direct to VHS. And I think that was 87, 88. I think, was that 90s? I think that was late 80s, but I could be wrong. That could have been 90. But here's the thing that happened. New Line Cinema was trying their damnedest to distance themselves from Freddy Krueger, which is why they took the Ninja Turtle license in the first place, because New Line Cinema are the ones who did the live-action Ninja Turtle movies. They're also the ones who did The Mask. But they didn't want The Mask film to be anything like the comics because they didn't want it to be reminiscent of Freddy Krueger. Which is the same reason why the Mortal Kombat film they did in 1995 was PG-13, because again, they didn't want an R-rated, bloody, gory movie because they said they already had that with Nightmare on Elm Street. They were trying to distance themselves from Freddy Krueger. So Mortal Kombat, which is a video game property, that's a separate topic, was, PG-13. And then The Mask was PG-13 when the comics were not. I would say The Mask was a good movie, but not faithful to the comics. Now let's get into the Tim Burton Batmans. Tim Burton's 1989 Batman, let's be real. It's a solid movie, but it is not faithful to the comics at all. This Tim Burton said himself when he was making the movie, he never read a comic book in his life. He didn't give a shit about the continuity or the characters or the setting. He just wanted to play in Gotham City. That's it. This is very obvious when you look at the nothing like the comics Penguin from Batman Returns, nothing like the comics Riddler in Batman Forever, which Tim Burton was only a producer on, I think executive producer. Joel Schumacher was the director. And then, obviously, the shit show that was Batman and Robin. Again, nothing like the comics. So even the Batman movies that get high praise really aren't in the 90s, I should say. Well, Batman was 89, but Batman Returns and Batman Forever generally get pretty well praised. They weren't faithful to the comics at all. Not even a little bit. They weren't even trying to be faithful to the comics. They made Barbara Gordon Alfred's niece. No, that's more offensive than what they did with her character in Gotham, which was, I guess, allegedly, technically a separate character, but it was Barbara Gordon. It was always meant to be Barbara Gordon, but they just decided it can't be Barbara Gordon. The thing with The Mask, yes, it was out. He did Ace Ventura in 91, I believe, or 92. And then, I believe it was 91 or 92. The following year, he did Ace Ventura 2. And then 94, he did Dumb and Dumber. So by the time we got to The Mask in 95, he was already a household name. Maybe The Mask was late 94, but it came out after Dumb and Dumber. I do know that. But I do know they specifically, they chose Jim Carrey for that role because he was going to, because the comic book character was too similar to Freddy Krueger, and they knew Jim Carrey was nothing like Freddy Krueger. I mean, he was wisecracking, I guess, but not the same, not on the level as Freddy Krueger. He was a different kind of wisecracking. And then there was Blade. Again, Blade is a solid movie, an absolute masterpiece, I would argue. But again, not tremendously faithful to the comics, but it doesn't stray as far from the comics as The Mask does, but it's not tremendously faithful either. Now, being faithful to the comics was not a goal of comic book movies in the 90s. It wasn't really a goal until the MCU, actually, because before that, Hollywood went out of their way to intentionally make superhero movies that weren't faithful to the comics because they said comic books wouldn't translate to film. That was the prevailing thought process at the time. They were fucking wrong, obviously. But that was the thought process, which is why Green Goblin looks like something out of, The Matrix or Terminator, nothing like what he looks like in the comics, because they said, well, he looks too cheesy and hokey for a movie. No one would watch a movie with that, with a character that looked like that. They were wrong. People would have preferred a more faithful to the comic rendition of Green Goblin to what we got. No shade to Willem Dafoe's performance. He did the best he could with the material he was given, but that costume is atrocious. But again, we're getting outside the 90s again. But it still carries over, because Bryan Singer, when he was making X-Men in 2000, he was quoted as saying, "I'm not making a comic book movie, I'm making a sci-fi movie." He went out of his way to downplay the relationship between the film and the comics, which is why, again, the X-Men movie from 2000, not at all faithful to the comics, which again, released in 2000, which would have been filmed in pre-production in the 90s, probably 98, 99. So again, you have another example where Hollywood was like, we're making a movie based on a comic book, but it's not a comic book movie, because they couldn't market comic book movies in the 90s. Which is strange, because the comics boom of the 90s was huge. Like, everybody was into comic books in the 90s. So it's really weird that here's a decade that is bringing in more comic book fans than we've ever seen up until recent history at that point in time. And yet they can't make movies based on comic books, or if they do, they can't make them faithful to the comic books. It's just weird. So I'm going to rubber stamp the 90s was not a good decade for comic book movies. You had maybe 3, maybe 4 quality movies that transcend the tropes of the time, but as a whole, the vast majority of comic book based superhero movies in the 90s were pretty rubbish. Even the good ones aren't even great ones, not by today's standards, not even by standards of like 2004, just a few years later. So that's my comic book topic for the episode. Now I got a retail topic that I'm going to briefly touch on, because I was going to bring it up last week and I skipped over it. And it is what to do about the dreaded dressing room. So if you ever went clothes shopping at a department store, you probably know that it's best to try on the clothes you're buying before you take them home. This is one of the reasons why clothes shopping on eBay or Amazon is a risky business, let's just say. Because, yeah, you got returns and everything, but come on, who wants to go through that? I mean, yeah, you could buy, as long as you don't take the tags off and you keep the receipt, you can buy something from Macy's or Target, take it home, find out it don't fit, take it back, but that's a hassle. But is that more of a hassle than standing in line and having to get a ticket handed to you by some, woman clerk who doesn't really want to be there because they're not paying her well? just to be sent into a room with a mirror, a closet with a mirror, not a room, a closet with a mirror, where you have to undress, get dressed, try on. Is it really worth it? I don't think so. I think I would prefer to just take my chances. I know what clothes I wear. I do the hold up test where I look at it, put it up to me and think, yeah, this should fit. Take it home, and if it don't fit, well, I keep the receipt, I take it back, trade it for the next size up. I do the same thing with Amazon. If Amazon says it's extra large, I buy 2XL because Amazon's always wrong. If they say it's 2XL, you got to go to 3XL because their sizes are always smaller than they're supposed to be. But when it does arrive, if it don't fit, I usually just send it right back and get the next size up or get something else. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we should probably just get rid of dressing rooms in department stores. They're outdated. We don't need them because return policies are pretty robust. And I'd rather go home and change in the privacy of my bedroom than a little tiny closet with a mirror that may or may not have somebody's cell phone peeking in. We got a video game topic. Oops. This was last week's video game topic. Oh no, I forgot to update the show list. So, unfortunately, I don't have a video game topic this week, and I'm not going to pull one out of thin air. So, I do apologize for that. I didn't update my show notes. I guess we could just talk about the Nintendo Direct. I mentioned this at the top of the show during the news segment, but it pisses me off that everybody's reporting that this new Legend of Zelda game where you get to play as Zelda is the, quote, first game where you get to play as Zelda. That's not true. There were 2 Zelda games on the CDI where you got to play as Zelda. So, yeah, those games weren't great games. They're not as bad as James Rolfe says they are, so you really shouldn't be listening to James Rolfe if you're trying to get opinions on if games are good or not, because he's a comedian, he's not a reviewer. People forget that. But, again, who the hell owned a CDI? Nobody. Can you play CDI games today? Not easily. So, while it is technically true, she was a playable character in a CDI game in 1992, 93, does that count if it's not easily accessible? Well, yeah, but I think the headline should be first modern Zelda game to make Zelda playable character, or first Zelda game on Nintendo hardware to make Zelda a playable character. Those would be more accurate than just saying this is the first video game ever that let you play as Zelda, because not only that, she's a playable character in the Smash Brothers. So again, saying this is the first video game that lets you play as Zelda is just not accurate no matter how you slice it. So I guess that's my... No, I didn't. And the reason why I didn't mention those is because I believe those were all direct-to-video or made-for-TV movies. Like the made-for-TV New Mutants movie. There was a made-for-TV Nick Fury movie. There were a lot of made-for-TV movies in the 90s and direct-to-VHS movies, which again kind of reinforces my what I was saying, that 1, Hollywood didn't take them seriously, and 2, they weren't all that good to begin with, mostly because they didn't have good budgets, the studios didn't believe in them, and none of them were really faithful to the comics, not really. I think the first superhero comic book movie that I can think of off the top of my head, besides Ninja Turtles, because like I said, they did make concessions, that was truly faithful to the comics was Ghost World. And that came out in 2002. But that one was easy to be faithful to the comics because it was a one-shot. It was just a graphic novel. And it was, a self-contained story. You didn't have decades and decades of backstory to try to sift through. And you didn't have spandex costumes that you had to turn into black leather for some reason. Because I guess leather is more believable than spandex. Even though in real life people wear spandex, they don't wear leather. I don't understand the logic. I never did understand the logic of that. I've been to the gym. it doesn't show. I don't have a regular membership, but I see people wear spandex all the time. I've never really seen anybody wear leather outside of like a biker bar. So, yeah, I don't understand the logic of black leather is more believable than spandex. I never understood that because it's not. People don't wear leather in real. They don't wear leather pants and leather. They might wear a leather jacket or leather boots or a leather belt, but Ross Geller proved that nobody wears black leather pants. Come on, Hollywood. Jesus Christ. All right, I do have a fun food topic, which I apologize for the language. I hope Christina is still watching, because if she is, this is a topic for you. It's seafood, fish, and sushi. So, I'm lumping all of the foods we get in the water together. So seafood, things that come from the oceans, crustaceans, squid, octopus, crab. What's that one that looks like a sea monster? Lobster, shrimp. And then, of course, this, actual fishies. Yeah, that's true. That is true about leather. Yeah. Fishies that come out of the ocean. And then when I say fish, obviously I just mean fish. Obviously, all catfish, tuna fish, cod, etc. And then sushi, which is it's not a type of fish, it's just a type of fish dish. But I'm also going to lump in river and lake critters, like what are they called? Crawfish. Do you call them crawfish or crawdads? I've heard it both ways, but I don't know if they're the same thing or not. I've also heard crayfish, but I don't know if that's just a different pronunciation, accent, dialect type thing, or if it's a different thing entirely. I don't know. Is crayfish and crawfish different, or are they the same thing? Crawdad. I don't know what a crawdad is. So let's talk seafood. Let's talk the sea monsters we eat, because all the seafood we eat are sea monsters. None of them are proper animals. We eat swordfish, which is a monster. We eat squid, which is scary. It's a giant, like, jelly spider. We eat octopus, which is a giant jelly spongy spider. We eat lobster, which is a giant scary looking spider with claws. We eat crab, which is a giant spider with claws. They're all spiders. Everything we get out of the ocean that we eat are spiders, just about. Why are we eating spiders? I know they're not technically spiders, but they are all arachnids. They all have 8 legs, like all of them. Why? Why are we eating monsters? Why are we taking monsters out of the ocean and eating them? That's not food. That's nightmare fuel. It's the stuff that, horror movie writers write movies about. Okay. I just wasn't sure, because I know I've had crawfish before, but I just wasn't sure what it was. Because in Texas, I believe they call it crawfish, but in Kansas, we called it crawdads. Which I guess they're the same thing. And I don't know about, I guess crayfish is the same thing too. Just a different way. I don't know which part of North America do people say crayfish, or is that the British? Is it the British that say crayfish? I guess. I don't know. I have to look this up. Then there's fish. Fish are hit or miss. They're not sea monsters like actual seafood, but they're like, blobs of fat, scaly fat. If you remove the scales or cook them properly, you don't taste the scales, but you still got to get the bones out of them because they're bony. They're bony critters. But, cows are bony too. We take the bones out of cows. So, that's a thing. Okay, in Canada, they say crayfish. So I'm going to assume that's probably the British way of saying it. that carried over to Canada because Americans like to say things intentionally different than the British. I'm not 100%, but that seems like the probably. So regular fish, you got catfish, which come out of lakes and ponds and are disgusting. You've got cod, which I think come out of oceans and rivers. Those are tasty. You've got flounder, which is the only one that's actually legit taste, like good. Like cod is edible, but flounder's delicious. Then you've got salmon, which is, a curse upon those who eat it. I can't stand salmon. Brrr. And then there are are there other fish people eat? Well, tuna, obviously, but tuna you don't eat. You don't go to, Red Lobster or Long John Silver's and order a fillet of tuna. I don't think you can fillet a tuna. They're ginormous. You get chunks of it shoved in a can with vegetable oil or water, and you just mix it with other stuff like mayonnaise and pickle relish and onions and whatnot to make it edible. Because tuna by itself, can you get how you can get salmon patties? Can you get tuna patties like that? I don't know. Or tuna fillets. Can you get tuna fillets? Is that a thing? What would tuna taste like in a fillet? Would it be edible? I wonder. I guess maybe the only way to eat tuna is out of a can, I guess, or a pouch. You can grill it up with some noodles and call it tuna helper if you're adventurous. And then there's sushi. Now, I'm going to be upfront and honest with you. I've only had sushi once in my life. It wasn't a great experience. It went into my mouth. Less than a second later, it found its way into the trash can. My palate firmly rejected it. It was like, nope. Now, I would be willing to try sushi again. This was obviously homemade sushi in a Japanese class in college. So, there's always the possibility that it wasn't properly prepared or the person didn't really know what they were doing or whatever. So, I'd be willing to try it again at a proper sushi restaurant, not from a gas station or an Albertsons, but an actual proper sushi restaurant. But I just haven't gotten around to it yet because I don't want to spend the $20-25 eating out to go to a restaurant to find out there's nothing I can eat. That would be a waste of money. It's kind of like when I go to the Chinese buffet, it takes me 3 hours to put together a plate of food when I go to the Chinese buffet because it's everything I've tasted, I have to put back on the plate, and it takes me 3 plates before I find something I can eat. All right, that's my food topic. Now, I have a music topic that is reminiscent of what we're seeing today between Kendrick Lamar and Mr. Degrassi himself. And we're just going to kind of touch upon revisiting the bullet points of the Tupac versus Notorious B.I.G. Beef of the late 90s. Now, I'm going to be fair and I'm going to be respectful to the dead because both of these men are dead. But that's the extent of as polite as I'm going to be about Christopher Wallace and his relationship with Puff Daddy. I'm not going to get into the personal stuff. I'm not going to get into the personal attacks, the accusations and allegations. I'm just going to talk about the music, just who had the better diss track. Notorious B.I.G. made one diss track against Tupac and Company. Well, specifically Tupac, but it was targeted at the West Coast as well. But it wasn't even a proper diss track. It was I'm so hot, you are not. And he had one line in the track that says, so-called beef with you-know-who. That is a cowardly way to make a diss track. That is not a proper diss track. The entire song is him talking about how he's the real ghetto, he's the real mafioso, blah, blah, blah. And he makes one passing reference to an alleged imaginary beef that he doesn't even identify by name or coast or city or anything. No details at all. He's just kind of sort of, oh, I'm better than you, but I'm not going to say who you are. Your name ain't worth being in my mouth. Now, cover your ears if you're offended by profanity, because Tupac's response literally starts off with the first line is, I fucked your bitch, you fat motherfucker. And then it proceeds to be like, fuck Biggie, fuck Tupac, and then, or not Tupac, but Puff Daddy, you know, Junior Mafia, the whole Bad Boy crew, blah, blah. I mean, it's brutal. The song's called Hit 'Em Up. I mean, it's brutal. From start to finish, it is 3.5 minutes of you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you are gonna die. 9 months later, he died. That's how you do a beef. You want to do a diss track, you call them out by name and you follow through. If you say, I'm a, you know, break your arm, and you don't break their arm, then don't say it. If you say, I'm going to put 25 bullets in the back of you, and you don't put 25 bullets in their back, then shut the fuck up. Yeah, I know the East Coast, West Coast beef was a lot bigger than just Tupac and Biggie. It was actually Bloods and Crips. It was New York versus, you know, it was New York versus LA. It was, you know, Brooklyn versus Compton. There was a lot more to it than just Tupac and Biggie. But when they did diss tracks, Biggie's diss track was, you suck, ha, ha, ha. And Tupac's diss track was, bitch, you're gonna fucking die. And he fucking died. So who did it better? Tupac. Tupac did it better. Yeah, Tupac got shot as a result for everything that went down as well. Obviously, we know this is how the story goes. You know, hit on Tupac, retaliation, revenge hit on Biggie. Yes. Do we want that to happen again with Drake and Kendrick? No. But the Kendrick beef and the Drake beef, we found out yesterday, was pretty decisively won. There is no more debate. Because on Juneteenth, a federally recognized black holiday in the United States, Kendrick performed his diss track where he referred to Drake as a colonizer 5 times, with several NBA stars rapping along with him on stage, including LeBron James and a former Toronto Raptor. You can't get more I fucking won than that. Back in the 90s, no, they pretty much stayed out of it. Like, Snoop Dogg made a couple of pot shots in interviews on MTV, but he didn't really make any diss tracks. Now, to be fair, Snoop has never really been known for making diss tracks, except for on 1992's The Chronic, where he went all out on Eazy-E and Ruthless Records. Even going so far as to say, you know, they did bad things to him in the behind. And more than that. Yeah, that was the only time I can think of where Snoop Dogg was involved in a proper diss track, but that was him dissing Eazy-E, which was a fellow West Coast gangster rapper. So I don't think that counts. Coolio stayed out of it. A lot of people forget that Coolio was a West Coast gangster rapper because they think of him as a Nickelodeon rapper, because his song was used as the theme song for Kenan and Kel. But he was a gangster rapper. He was West Coast G-Funk. A lot of people forget this. He wasn't hardcore like Tupac or, you know, Snoop or RBX or the Dog Pound, but he was still, you know, I mean, his CDs did get parental advisories. The CD was called It Takes a Thief. That's not exactly kid-friendly. Yeah, he did diss Suge, but again, that's him dissing somebody else in the same ethos. You know, that Suge Knight was the founding father, if you will, of the West Coast G-Funk scene. Yeah, but that's not really East. Now, I know Dr. Dre did a "I'm better than you, but let's make peace" pseudo diss track on 2001, the Chronic 2001. The song was called "What's the Difference," where he basically says, where he's rapping about what's the difference between me and you, and he's talking about, well, I've got more bank accounts and more clout and blah blah blah. And you could argue that The Watcher from that same album was sort of a general angry at the industry for not showing him respect, but it wasn't a specific diss at anyone in particular. It was just a, hey, I'm the fucking rap god that put gangsta rap on the map. Why in the hell are you not showing me respect? Kind of thing. But he also followed that up with the Forgot About Dre that he did with Eminem on that same album. But Dr. Dre also said, I don't need to make records. And he's right. He's made 3 records in his life. Literally 3 records to his name. And he's still the richest guy in hip hop. So yeah, he don't need to make records. He does it. He makes tracks. He produces other people. And he does produce Kendrick Lamar, by the way. Kendrick is one of Dr. Dre's proteges. Which is why Dr. Dre came out and introduced Not Like Us last night at the Juneteenth concert in Inglewood, which is Snoop Dogg's home. So yeah, that was a very different battle. Now, Jay-Z did take some general pot shots at the other side of the industry, which I think is a reference to the West Coast, but he also was like, let's not fight. Let's, after Tupac and Biggie died, everybody was pretty much like, let's just call a truce. They were, even Snoop Dogg, in the middle of a concert, dropped the mic and said, I'm done. I'm not a gangster no more. I'm a pimp. I'm a guy who's going to smoke weed. And he walked off the stage and he didn't finish the set. And that's when he shifted his focus in his music, where he wasn't rapping about being a gangster no more. He was rapping about smoking weed and, all the money he counts. Now he has returned to gangster rap in recent years, partially as a response to the former U.S. president, who is now a convicted felon, when he came out with Make America Crip Again. And then he bought up the assets and the remains of Death Row Records. So now Snoop owns Death Row Records today. And he is putting out new content under the Death Row label with the former Death Row artists that he worked with in the 90s, including Warren G and the Dog Pound, even though he's kind of had some, I would say he's had some issues with the Dog Pound in over the years. It appears as though he's made peace with them. But yeah, I want to clarify when I say that Biggie and Tupac did it right. I mean the diss tracks, Tupac did it right. The let's pull out our guns and take this to the streets was the wrong way to handle it, obviously, because both men are dead and they both left a giant hole in the record industry and in their families' lives as a result of them taking it too goddamn far. But to be fair, the whole thing started with Tupac going to Bad Boy Records to meet Notorious B.I.G. when Tupac was a Philadelphia rapper. He was not West Coast. And he got shot 5 times and mugged in the lobby of Death Row Records by an unknown assailant. He believed and alleged at the time that Puff Daddy or Biggie were behind the mugging, and that's what started the beef. It literally did start with Tupac getting shot 5 times, going to the hospital and surviving. So when he raps about, you guys tried to shoot me and you failed, he's not full of shit. He really was shot 5 times and did survive. The second time, he was shot 27 times. You can survive a gunshot. You can survive 5 or 6 gunshots. You're not surviving 27 gunshots. I don't care who you are. So it was a little different. Now, there was the possibly related bodyguard shooting at Drake's mansion last month, but nothing new has come of that. And there is the totally unrelated, but I just like to bring it up, Puff Daddy being investigated by the federal government. I'm not a fan of Puff Daddy, and I will be honest with you, I was on the West Coast side of the beef. I bought Tupac's records, I bought Snoop Dogg's records, Dr. Dre's. I was West Coast all the way. The only New York rappers I ever paid money to buy their CDs. I bought one Jay-Z CD in my lifetime, Volume 2, the only legit good CD he ever made. And Nas, I bought Illmatic, Stillmatic, and Nostradamus, because Illmatic is pretty dope for an entire record with not a single guest. Not a single guest. That is amazing in hip-hop. That never happens. Nostradamus was boring, but I bought it anyways because Illmatic was dope. And Stillmatic had the diss track Ether, which literally starts off with a bunch of gunshots and him saying, fuck Jay-Z. Yeah, that beef didn't last long. But that, if you count the Beastie Boys as New York rappers, which you probably should, I bought every Beastie Boys record that was ever produced. Rap, rock, punk, or otherwise. I have never paid money for another New York rapper in my life, and I never will. None of them. I don't care if it's Kanye. I don't care if it's YG. I don't care who it is. None of them are worth my time. If they're not from LA, or they're not from the Deep South, if they're not affiliated with Master P and his bunch of friends, Silk the Shocker and Mystical, if they're not from the West Coast or affiliated with the West Coast, they don't mean shit to me. They don't even register in my brain as far as hip hop goes. Which is why, do I listen to Ludacris? Fuck no. Fuck no. They're not great. Okay. The East Side. Okay, so from what I remember, and this is all fuzzy memories from 2004, 2005. From what I remember, one of the members of the Dog Pound made hey, your record wouldn't have been a hit without us comment on one of their records in reference to Snoop Dogg, and he pretty much destroyed them on one of his records. I didn't know he had any beef with the East Siders. Because Snoop Dogg, well, he started the Dog Pound, but he also started the East Siders, so I'd have to read up on that. I'm not familiar with that. But again, that's that all of Snoop's beefs are with other people on the West Coast, it seems. He doesn't really have beef with the East Coast. I think Snoop is one of those, he just doesn't care. He's above it all, He doesn't get caught up in the Crips and Bloods and East and West and Bad Boy versus Death Row because he's above it all. He just doesn't have to. Yeah, Corrupt, he popped his mouth a few times. I do remember that. But I don't know what became of it. I know the dog food was produced by Suge Knight and was released by Death Row Records. And I know 2002 was released by Death Row Records, but Suge had already gone to prison by then. So I don't know who produced 2002. From then on, until they did Cali is Active, which they did with Snoop Dogg, I don't think the Dog Pound were relevant until Cali is Active. They were pretty much like small beans. People just forgot about them. They were just like, oh yeah, I kind of sort of remember that one song they did on that one album they did with that other guy, kind of thing, you know? They were like the guest appearances on everybody else's albums, but on their own albums, nobody took them seriously. And I'm saying this as someone who owns both Dog Food and 2002 on CD and regularly listens to at least one Dog Pound track. What Would You Do? Pretty regularly. What Would You Do is one of the greatest G-Funk record or greatest G-Funk tracks of all time. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you listen to Doggy Style, it is undeniable that record wouldn't work if you remove the Dog Pound. It wouldn't work. The Chronic, you can't say the same thing. The Chronic is a totally different beast. If you remove the Dog Pound from the 2 tracks they're on the Chronic, it changes nothing. You just get somebody else to spit those verses. But if you remove the Dog Pound from Serial Killer or Ins and B's, which I'm not going to say out loud, or you remove them from what was the other one they were big on? It Ain't No Fun If the Homies Can't Have None. If you take the Dog Pound off those 3 tracks, you don't have a track. There's no track. There's nothing there. You got to completely rewrite the entire song, or you got to replace it with something else. Now, that's only 3 tracks out of 18. So could the Dog Pound say they made Doggy Style what it was? No, because Lottie Dottie was a solo Snoop song. Gin and Juice was a solo Snoop song. What's My Name, Who Am I was a solo Snoop song. And those are the 3 big hits from the record. Those are the jams people remember. When people think of Doggy Style, they think of Gin and Juice, Lottie Dottie, What's My Name. They don't think of Serial Killer or Ins and B's or Ain't No Fun If the Homies Can't Have None. Those aren't the songs people are humming along. And if you're white, you should not be humming along to the lyrics to most of those songs anyways. Not appropriate. But I would argue that the Dog Pound's presence on Doggy Style was felt, yes. But again, those 3 tracks that they're on, they're not the only ones on those tracks. Warren G is on 2 of the 3. RBX is on 1 of the 3. And Snoop Dogg's on all 3 of them. So could you argue, yeah, let's hypothetically pretend Daz and Corrupt weren't on Serial Killer. You replace them with, I don't know, the DOC and maybe Mac 10. You have the same track. Nothing changes. Same thing with Ain't No Fun. Same thing with the 3rd track. I'm not going to say its name. But I would argue, if you're looking at the record as a whole, Warren G and RBX and the Lady of Rage were more impactful on Doggy Style as a whole than the Dog Pound were. I don't know who Trey D is, so I'm going to have to look into that person. That's the extent of what I have to say about the East Coast, West Coast beef and the Kendrick Drake beef. Other than Drake, go back to Degrassi and shut the fuck up. We're over it. The whole world is over it. You lost. You can't show your face in public for 9 months. Don't even try. You got burned. You got chopped up into little pieces, buried in the grave in your mama's backyard, and pissed on. It's time to move on. All right, we've reached the point of the show where I move into random thoughts. So random thoughts begin with saying hi to Buddy. Hi, Buddy. He's like, don't do that. And I'm going to pet him anyways. So this is where I take questions and or extend the show for the next 30 minutes where I just ramble. This is my favorite part of the show because I don't have anything scripted. I get to just talk. Oh, I've got some videos coming today. All my videos are coming later today. Some of them are coming tomorrow. And I have some bad news about the Bri's Toy Talk live show. I am not doing that show anymore. It's just too much work and not enough people watch it. And really, it's just, there's not a lot of toy news. Toy news is not something that you can really do weekly. Because a lot of times it was just, this toy is now available for pre-order, or this toy is coming soon, or this toy just came. There's not a lot of toy news, so I felt like that show didn't serve a purpose. I'm just going to go back to doing my regular toy reviews and unboxings on that channel. Do you remember 21 Jump Street from Murder Was the Case? Yes, Murder Was the Case, the soundtrack, the album, which is what it's officially titled, was the very first West Coast gangster rap record I ever bought. I bought it for the remix of the track Murder Was the Case. And yes, What Would You Do, which is my second or third all-time favorite G-Funk track of all time, is from that record, from that soundtrack. Have I seen the movie? No. Do I love the soundtrack? Yes. My three favorite songs from the record are What Would You Do, the Murder Was the Case remix, and Natural Born Killers that Dr. Dre did with Ice Cube. Again, Natural Born Killers could be seen as a diss track, but it's kind of more of a I'm a murderer, don't fuck with me in general track, which is, a pretty common theme in the West Coast G-Funk era. It is a pretty good soundtrack. The rest of the album is good, but those are the three tracks that transcend the album. And I would argue What Would You Do is probably the highlight of the record. I just love that jam. I listen to it all the time. I listen to it, like, no joke, at least 12 times a day. I'm always bumping that jam. That's a dope-ass jam. That is the track that got me into the Dog Pound as a crew, as a band, a hip-hop duo. Again, as a white person, I have to be very careful how I refer to them, because I know he's changed his name in recent years, but Daz Dillinger used to go by a different name I can't say. And Corrupt the Kingpin has changed his name to Young Gotti at some point in time, but I think he went back to Corrupt. But I think it's just Corrupt now. But I'm not 100%. Sam Snead and Nate Dogg. Oh yeah, Nate Dogg, rest in peace. Oh, I am so bummed about Nate Dogg passing away. Not just because it happened, but because it was so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And I'm not diminishing Nate Dogg, but it wasn't widely reported on. I didn't learn he died until a year after he had been dead, because it wasn't widely. It was just one of those, like, afterthoughts. Nobody really talked about it. And I wasn't on, like, music sites at the time. I wasn't on Twitter. Didn't exist at the time, I don't think, or if it did, I wasn't on it. And I wasn't really paying attention to media news at the time. But, like, when he died, it wasn't like, the 6 o'clock news didn't report on it like they did when Tupac died. When Tupac died, the world stopped, and that was all they talked about for 24 hours. When Nate Dogg died, unfortunately, it is what it is. It was just a footnote. Okay, that's weird. Interesting. I can see your comment, but it won't let me approve it. That's weird. I clicked show and it says another moderator just handled this, but I'm the only moderator. So I don't know what that is. I don't know what that means. That's weird. I do apologize for that. I haven't made my top 25 G-Funk tracks of all time yet, but it is a video I am working on, and I can't wait to do it, because I think when you just parse out the radio hits, there's some really good stuff. There's some really good stuff out there that people aren't as familiar with, because everybody knows the radio hits, the MTV hits, you know, but they don't know the lesser known stuff, which is unfortunate, because, you know, when it comes to radio hits, I'll say this. When it comes to top 40 hip hop, when it comes to MTV representation, yes, New York does it better. Obviously, I can't deny this. They are better at getting on the radio. They are better at getting played in clubs. They have the broader mass appeal, and they're better at getting on MTV, or at least they were back in the day. The West Coast, specifically Compton, LA, Inglewood, the G-Funk, quote, Crips and Bloods stuff, not so much. Snoop Dogg generally can get good radio play. Dr. Dre from time to time. Eminem, but he's not really West Coast, but he's kind of sort of under that umbrella because he's produced by Dr. Dre. But like actual legit G-Funk artists like Warren G, WC, West Side Connection, Mac 10, the Dog Pound we mentioned, Lady of Rage, RBX, the DOC, they don't get radio play. None of them. Even at his height, Warren G only had one song on the radio, and that was Regulate G-Funk Era. Regulate is a damn good song, don't get me wrong, but it's not like, as far as radio play goes, it got radio play, but nothing like Hypnotize got, or Mo Money, Mo Problems. Nothing like anything Jay-Z has ever done or Nas has ever done. Those guys get radio play like you wouldn't believe. I don't think I've ever in my entire life heard a single Dog Pound track on the radio, or RBX, or the Lady of Rage. Not one. Not a single one. So yeah, I will give New York their props. They're better at marketing hip hop. They're better at getting it in the mainstream than the West Coast is. I just prefer the G-Funk sound, and I prefer the street poetry. They tell actual stories. If you listen to Shorty Wanna Be a Thug, or Push and Wait, or, even Gangsta's Paradise, which is like the closest anybody in the West Coast ever got to winning an whatever the award is. What is it? Grammy, I guess. Those are poems dressed up like rap songs. But the East Coast, all across the board, their songs are, I got more money than you. I fuck more bitches than you. I own more cars than you. That's not a story. That's just you bragging about how God gave you more, gifts in life than me. Fuck off. But when you listen to, even when you listen to like Dear Mama by Tupac, or, Dr. Dre, Medicine Man. Listen to Medicine Man. He's like got stuff to say, or even Genocide on Genocide's an underrated track. That's a powerful track. You've got to listen to Genocide if you haven't yet, because he really rips apart the system. He's like, yeah, you gave us crack, and then you threw us in cages for smoking the crack. It's a lot more to it than that, but he's pissed. Dr. Dre is pissed on that song. But the New York rappers, they don't, by and large, I'm sure there are examples, they don't tell stories. Like sometimes they tell like goofy, stories like Slick Rick, or Will Smith. Will Smith isn't really a New York rapper, though. He's Philadelphia. But he's what you think of when you think of New York rap, or at least East Coast rap, I should say. Because Will Smith is as mainstream as it gets. There's no rapper on the face of this earth more mainstream than Will Smith. My mom listens to Will Smith. She doesn't even know who Snoop Dogg is. Yeah. So you really can't get more mainstream than it. But that's Philadelphia. That is East Coast, but that's not New York. Now, are there some individual New York rappers that transcend the art? Yes, Nas. Nas is probably, in my opinion, the greatest MC, bar none, regardless East Coast, West Coast. Nas is the shit. Nas is probably the best lyricist that has ever ripped lyrics on a mic. And I think he's going to go down in history with that title. Pretty well said. I don't know. Kendrick could be coming for him, but I'm not a fan of To Pimp a Butterfly, and that's his, big mantra. And I was like, all right. I mean, you got skills, and you're telling a story, but you forgot to make the jams. You got to tell a story, but you got to do it in a musical fashion. Way underrated. Way underrated. But I highly recommend checking out Mac 10. He's one of those West Coast rappers people don't even remember if they've heard of him. You say his name and they're like, yeah, that kind of vaguely almost sounds sort of familiar-ish, but he's not somebody people remember or think of. And that's a shame because he's pretty damn good. Mac 10 is 1/3 of West Side Connection. It's him, WC, and Ice Cube. Yes, everybody knows Ice Cube's a household name, but that's because his name is Ice Cube. When your name is Ice Cube, you're going to remember that. Thank you. Also, he's the one that did Fuck the Police, which is probably the most important, maybe not greatest, but most important West Coast gangster rap track of all time. Because that's literally the track that made Death Row and Aftermath and Doghouse Records and everything we have today possible. None of it would have happened had Fuck the Police not been a mega hit. Because before Fuck the Police, Dr. Dre was doing breakdancing tracks with the world-class Wrecking Crew. Nobody remembers them, with good reason. Don't look them up. They suck. I mean, even for the time, they suck. I mean, I don't just mean they suck. I mean, even for what hip-hop sounded like at the time, they suck. Now, if you go back in time before 1992, before Death Row Records came on the scene, before there was such a thing as West Coast G-Funk, yes, there are some legit good New York rappers. LL Cool J, Run DMC, I've previously mentioned the Beastie Boys, Curtis Blow, the Grandmaster Flash, Melly Mel. Those are all good, legit rappers, breakdancers, DJs. Those are legit artists. The East Coast was still telling stories back then. But after the beef started, it went from, street poets versus street poets to street poets on one side and a bunch of braggarts on the other side. Did you occasionally get some poetry out of the East Coast? Yeah, Nas. Jay-Z had some good stuff on In My Lifetime, Volume 2. By the time, in my opinion, by the time you get to the Dynasty, Jay-Z's lost his way. And from then on, he's just too big for his britches. which, you know, respect to him for what he was able to build, considering his background. Yes, legit props. Good for him. Do I like his music? Not a lot of it. Not enough of it. Like I said, I own really, out of everything he's done, and I've heard it all, most of it. Out of everything he's done, Volume 2 is the only legit good record he's ever made, in my opinion. And that is chock full of guest appearances. The other, quote, king of the East, I don't even say his name, you know who he is. The freak who likes Trump and thinks he's God. I don't even say his name. I don't listen to none of his shit. Never have, never will. I've heard it. Spotify recommends it to me because I like, you know, rap music, obviously. But I don't even say his name. To be honest, I don't even know what his name is. He keeps fucking changing it. He's like Puff Daddy, who I'm just going to call him Puff Daddy. I don't care what he changes it to, because he was always Puff Daddy as far as I'm concerned. I'll call him Diddly Dumbass from time to time just to be a bitch. Just like I call Christopher Wallace Notorious Fat Ass. To be fair, his name was his professional name was Biggie Smalls, and he did rap about being a fat guy. And I'm a fat girl, so it is what it is. I like one song from Volume 1. In My Lifetime, Volume 1. I don't know if Jay-Z did anything before Volume 1, but I like one song from In My Lifetime, Volume 1. And it was, I think it's called In the City or something like that. That's a legit good song. Or We Belong to the City or something like that. Reasonable Doubt. Okay, I've never heard that album. I'll have to check it out. I'll give it a shot, see what it's like. Back in my younger days, when I was still a teenager and didn't know shit, I did listen to some, what's his name? Timbaland. I did listen to some Timbaland. He is not a good rapper. Good producer, yes. But if he hadn't have worked with Magoo and everybody else in the industry, if he hadn't have worked with Rihanna and Justin Timberlake, who is not a rapper, nobody would know who Timbaland is today. Just like I love them. I love them to death, and they're the only Deep South hip-hop group I like. Quad City DJs, I'll jam to them all day long. Nobody knows who they are. People maybe remember Space Jam. Maybe they remember Come and Ride the Train, but they don't remember 95 South. They probably don't remember the 69 Boys. That's all J-Ski. Was he a legit good rapper? Probably not. But he made some dope jams, and that's all that matters. As long as the music's bumping, I don't care, really. Now, okay. Yeah, producer, yes. Rapper, no. I would say yes, I'd put him in the top 10 producers for sure. And yeah, I like that track he did, and that was a diss track that he did with Timbaland. That was a legit diss track. And that was a pretty good one too, by the way. That was a bump. I think it's called Give It To Me or something like that. That's a legit good song. And I love Timbaland and Magoo. Clock Strikes is one of my favorite hip-hop jams. Now, when we're just talking dance music, like jams. When I say jam, I mean dance music. Something, and I don't mean slow dancing. I mean like just for the specific purpose of shaking your ass. Yes, I will admit the New York rappers do it better. Yes, I can name 3, maybe 4 legit dance songs that came out of the West Coast. Legit, proper dance jams that came out of the West Coast. We'd be here until tomorrow if I was naming all the hip hop jams that came out of New York. Is that what they're good at? Yes. Making you dance, they're good at. Before I broke my foot, I liked to dance. Can't really do it no more, But I wish I could. Sometimes I wish I could anyways. Sometimes I'm just kind of like, you know what? I'm 42. I don't need to dance no more. You know? Now, newer artists, and when I say newer, I mean 2005 on, because most of the music I listen to is from 2004 backwards. Late seven, and we're talking hip hop here, but in general, but hip hop, I listen to a lot of the the old school jams from the 80s and a lot of variety. And even though my preference is West Coast G Funk, absolutely, I still listen to a good chunk. I still listen to a good chunk of, hip hop in general from all over the place from the 90s. Stuff like, Naughty by Nature, the Digital Underground, Arrested Development. Those were all good. Those were all Crisscross. Those were all good hip hop. Crisscross was a gimmick, but whatever. It is what it is. Jermaine Dupri had some good songs. Da Brat had some good songs. I used to really love Da Brat. Thought all the dance songs come from the South, the battle rap from the East, and boogie from the West. Well, okay. I don't know. I have to think about that because I'm thinking of the songs I dance to. Thinking of what I think of dance jams. I'm thinking of like, Mo Money, Mo Problems. That's New York. I'm thinking Hypnotize. That's New York. Yeah, that's Usher. That might be South. That's Ludacris. That's you're right. That's Dirty South. Jermaine Dupri, he's from Atlanta, so that's South. The Quad City DJs, 95 South, the 69 Boys, they're all from Atlanta. So yeah, you might be right. You might actually be right. I might be mistaken. I have to think about that. Now I'm confused. What specific New York songs was I thinking of? Because, Hip Hop Hooray, Naughty by Nature, I think they're from the South. Arrested Development, they're from Africa. So, let's see. I guess I was thinking of Timbaland, Clock Strikes specifically. Clock Strikes the remix, and Busta Rhymes. He had some good dance jams. Break Your Neck. What else did he have? Dangerous was a good dance song. Woo-Ha, Got Y'all in Check, although I don't know if that's really a dance song. What else did Busta Rhymes do? He did a song, I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, LL definitely. LL for sure. Especially I Can't Live Without My Radio, although that's definitely old school. That's more breakdancing than just jams. But it's still a good jam. But I would say Mama Said Knock You Out is a jam. And I would definitely say Phenomenon is a jam. Where's Q-Tip from? Q-Tip had some good jams. He was a Tribe Called Quest. He might be New York. Excuse me. Because I think of Award Tour is one of my favorite dance songs from the period. And that's the Tribe Called Quest. And he did a crossover with the Q-Tip and Nas are the only non-Beastie Boys rappers to ever do crossovers with the Beastie Boys. Q-Tip did a song called Get It Together on, I believe it was Ill Communication. And Nas did a song called Too Many Rappers, Not Enough MCs or something like that on Hot Sauce Committee Part 2. Yeah, I guess I equate East Coast dance songs with like LL and Will Smith, because Will Smith is, he's that like I mentioned earlier, you're gonna dance. Will Smith's song comes on, you're gonna dance. If it's Boom Shake the Room, if it's Summertime, if it's Getting Jiggy with It. I mean, that's the whole point of Will Smith songs, to move your booty. But he's Philadelphia. That's not New York, but it is still East Coast. I don't know. I guess I don't have any. I guess all things considered, hip hop is good all the way around. It doesn't really matter fighting over who's the best, because they all got their things. Like, like I said, there are 4 or 5 artists from Atlanta that I like. I'm not sure where Master P and the No Limit Soldiers come from. I know they call themselves Down South, but I don't know. Are they from Texas? Are they Southern California? I don't know. Musically, Master P and his bunch sound like G-Funk. Musically, they do. But I'm not sure where they're from. And at the end of the day, it don't really matter. Fighting over what city you were born in is kind of stupid, because that's not something you had a say in. Oftentimes, your parents didn't have a say in it. It just was happenstance. It's just where they were at the time, because babies pop out when they pop out. Okay, New Orleans. That's definitely South. Like that. That's Southern. But I don't know if that qualifies as, quote, dirty South. I think when they say dirty South, they mean Atlanta. But I don't know. I don't know that stuff. I'm not from the South. I grew up in the Midwest and the West. Kansas, Nebraska, Idaho, Nevada. That's where I grew up. I lived a little bit in Texas, a little bit in California, a little bit in Arizona. But for the most part, yeah. I spent most of my time in Idaho, Nevada, Kansas, and Texas. I guess technically Texas is a part of the South, but it feels more like Southwest to me, I guess. I guess parts of Texas is so ginormous. I mean, it's Southwest, South, and Midwest all at the same time, depending on what point of the state you're in. Texas is just ginormous. Sometimes I talk shit about Texas, but that's mostly because of their politics and the back-ass words. Hillbilly rednecks that live there. But as a whole, I mean, it's a good state as a whole. Dallas is pretty cool. Houston seems like it would be pretty cool. I have a friend from Austin who's one of my best friends, and she always talks about how great Austin was. Regardless of region or style or genre or whatever, most of the music I listen to, especially rap music, is still going to be 2005 backwards. There's a handful of legacy artists from that time who have works outside that period that I listen to, like Dr. Dre's Compton, Eminem's Marshall Mathers LP Volume 2. The only hip-hop, I'm using air quotes here, artists, bands, groups, whatever you want to call them, that I discovered I liked and actually do own I own the 2 CDs, one from each. I own 1 CD from the Far East Movement. They were pretty good, and they have a song with Snoop Dogg. And I have a CD from LMFAO. They had a couple of jams, good danceable jams. I don't know where either of those bands are from. I assume the Far East Movement is just based on their name and the ethnicity of the rappers. I would assume they're from Asia somewhere, but I don't want to make that assumption. But that is sort of the brand they painted themselves as. But that CD had at least 3 or 4 songs I really liked. And that was from 2013, 14-ish, maybe? And then LMFAO, they've got like 3, maybe 4 songs I like, I guess. Is Kesha hip hop? If you count Kesha as hip hop, I like one of her songs. I think she's probably, is she pop? I don't know what you count. I don't know what Kesha is. White trash? Oops. Yeah, I remember liking one of her songs. But now we're getting outside of hip hop. Like music in general. You know, I only like 3 songs from Compton. I'm going to be honest. I like Genocide. I like One Shot, One Kill, and I like Medicine Man. The rest of the album didn't do it for me, to be fair. And Detox, oh geez, that's a whole video all on its own. But stepping outside of rap music, hip hop music for a second, I actually do listen to quite a bit of music beyond just hip hop. I listen to a lot of techno, a lot of dance music. I listen to a lot of pop music, R&B, rock, heavy metal, punk rock, jazz, traditional funk or P-funk, not just G-funk. I like George Clinton, Parliament. You know, them are pretty good. I like a lot of disco, like actual 70s disco, but also a lot of new disco, you know, NU disco, which I also like a lot of the NU, the new metal, new rap, new metal, they call it. I like a lot of that stuff. A lot of people don't, but I enjoy some of it. Especially Power Man 5000 and Rob Zombie. I think you call those new metal. And as an artist, the human being, Brian Warner, is a piece of shit. But as a musician, Marilyn Manson as a gimmick is one of my favorite bands of all time. I listen to so much Marilyn Manson. So much. I own like 5 of his CDs, or their CDs. Because it's not, he's the front man, obviously. But the whole band contributes to their aesthetic. It's not just Brian Warner. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I'm a little white. How'd I get into hip hop in the first place? Well, two things happened. One, it was the 90s. It was just so big. It was on MTV. It was on the radio. It was on our sitcoms, you know. I was overexposed to it. And I just fell in love with it at an early age. But also, starting at age 14 till about 23, I lived in northern Nevada, and all my friends were not white. I didn't have any white friends. They were all either black or Hispanic. I had a couple of friends that were somewhere in the Middle East. I can't remember where. They were Muslim. But once I was like fully immersed in that scene, I was like, you know, it was just like rap music was just, it was just it. It was the shit. It was all we listened to. So, yeah, I know a lot of people, especially black people, don't like to hear a white woman talk about rap music. My opinions are probably not going to match up with somebody who's in that community's opinions. That's perfectly valid, perfectly fair, because my experiences don't match up with them, you know? One of my best friends, who was my roommate for a while, and a guy I definitely had a crush on, and kind of sort of dated almost. We were like not public, but we were like, you know, anyways, it is what it is. But anyways, he was black, and all he listened to was rap music. That was it. Nothing but rap music. He didn't listen to nothing else. And he generally agreed with my assessments. Sometimes he was a little more, he was way more open to other, other regions and styles than I was, even though he also grew up in the West Coast and he was big on Tupac as well. And his favorite team were the LA Lakers. And he literally, literally, as in the actual definition of the word literally only wore Kobe Bryant jerseys. He wore it to work. He wore it to sleep. He had every single one of them, every version, every variant. He had a whole closet full of nothing but Kobe Bryant jerseys. That's all he wore. So he was as LA as you get as far as, his, blood. He was born in LA. He still didn't give a shit about the East Coast, West Coast beef. He was just like, music's music, man. That was his philosophy. And I kind of agree with that. I like the G-Funk sound as well. I like the bass, the rhythms, the melodies, the keyboards and the pianos and that kind of stuff. They don't do so much of that in New York. In New York, most of their music is like sampling pop songs or R&B songs, which is a lot of guitars and bluesy sounding songs, which aren't bad, but it's a different sound. It's just a different sound, If I'm going to just sit and listen to a rap song, it's going to be a West Coast G-Funk song. If I'm going to dance, if I'm in the mood or I just want to listen to dance jams, I'll just pull up whatever. My playlist on Spotify has music from everywhere, all over the place. Except Drake. I've never even heard a Drake song. To be honest, I don't know what he sounds like. And honestly, I don't really care. I don't like new music anyways. I'm old, I'm the person who sits on my front porch yelling at the clouds to get off my grass. That's how old I am. Not that old, but I'm just like, you know what? I'm pretty well set in my ways. We have surpassed the 2-hour mark, which is where I usually end this stream. So thank you to everybody who participated, asked questions, and left comments or who watched. And stay cool. I'll see y'all sometime in the future.